Hello, everyone. Waiting for the slide to come up. Well, while we do that, thank you. I work for Bayer, and before I talk to you about the transformation that we are going through as a company towards a more fluid, flexible, and agile organization, maybe 2 or 3 words about our company, just in case you don't know who the heck is Bayer. We are a life science company. We have products in the field of health, but we also have products to ensure food security for an ever-increasing world population. And most of you may know our most famous product, and probably some of you have also already used it, which is aspirin. So again, we are active as a life science company. We are headquartered in Germany, but we have operations in 80 countries around the globe. We employ about 90,000 people from 145 or so nations, so quite diverse workforce. And as I said, we are undergoing a profound transformation as we speak. And I would say up until 2 years ago, we were probably looking like a lot of classical big multinational companies, organized in a hierarchical way, with quite a few silos, people not knowing left and right what their colleagues were doing. But now this has all changed. We're still in the middle of it, but we are 2 years into that journey. And what I want to show you here is our new operating model, very high level. We call it dynamic shared ownership. Dynamic because, as I said, we want to become more flexible and fluid. Shared ownership, also because we feel the ownership of the company is not just with the investors or with top management, but every single employee should be having a shared ownership in their company and also behave as a mini entrepreneur or businesswoman or businessman within their company. So there's 5 key principles that this is based upon. The one is, I would call, radical mission focus. So we want our people, we want to concentrate our resources on everything that is related to our mission. And I believe, but I'm of course biased, we have a wonderful mission, which is health for all, hunger for none. A very bold, very ambitious mission, but I think we are making credible progress towards achieving it. So we want to concentrate and focus everything on anything that creates value towards that mission. In return, it also means stopping everything that doesn't do that. We also have shifted towards giving empowerment to employees and to teams. So picture this as an organization that is made up of 10,000, 11,000 by now, and still counting teams, micro teams, or we call them also micro enterprises. Each one of those teams act as a micro enterprise. And what's really important, these teams are not static in their composition, but composition can change over time. So there's also some fluidity, which I will talk about in a minute. Third principle is radical value creation and customer focus. So it's all about creating impact, creating value, and centering our activities around the customer. And also something that we see more and more organizations adopting, and we do so too, these teams that I just spoke about, they work in 90-day cycles. So every 90 days, the team does a retro, they sit down, they define the priorities for the next 90 days, and. So very high-paced kind of environment. But I think what is very important for this whole model to work is that we create really an inclusive work environment. And as you may appreciate, if you have innovation at the center of your business model, it's indispensable that you have a diverse composition also of those teams for them to thrive and to produce the results that we want them to have. So really creating an environment where every employee can show up as their authentic selves is very important to us. All of this is also underpinned by a slightly evolved or even new leadership philosophy. And we all know examples of leadership, especially in hierarchical organization, where people, like I'm here, you're leading from the front, and you basically tell people, well, follow me. There's a lot of, I would say, also fights in leadership. We are looking more towards a leadership style that leads from behind, where leaders support and enable the team, but they are not sort of micromanaging the teams, because as I said, most of the decisions and the work should be done by the teams themselves. Now, I talked about us wanting to get more fluid and agile and nimble, and that's where talent flow, we call it, so having people flow from one team working on one project to another one. We want to encourage much more of this. If we look at career paths that our employees have today, they're pretty much, within certain parts of the organization, but there's not as much crisscross flowing from one part of the organization to the other. And of course, in order to get more of this flow and fluidity, you need transparency. So how do you achieve this? We chose to set up a global talent marketplace, which is now globally gone live at the beginning of the year. And picture this as, a platform just like LinkedIn, where you can upload your profile with all your skills. And at the same time, also those teams that I spoke about, they can upload their projects. And this platform is, if you like, a matchmaking platform where you match the skills that the teams require to do some work with employees that possess those skills. And you heard me say the word skill a lot, because all of this is based on skills. In the past, we've seen a lot of instances where somebody said, oh, I would like to have Mary on my team. Today, we want to have more discussions about, oh, I need this and this and this skill. And then we take a look, and maybe Mary has all these skills, and Mary also has a passion to work on that topic, but it could also be Maggie or it could be Tom who possess this. I think what this also does is it gives much more autonomy or authority, I should rather say, to employees to drive their own careers. Because one thing I've been hearing when I talk a lot to our top talents is they say, well, in the past, it's often been my manager has been the gatekeeper of my career. And that can be a tremendously positive thing if this is a manager who really cares about developing people. He or she opens up and leverages their networks to support young and rising talent. But it can also be someone who sort of, is the gatekeeper and does not transparently share all the opportunities that are there. This is different with this model, where you have full transparency and you can flow to where your interest is, and you can also determine which of your skills do you want to hone, new skills you want to acquire, and. I think what it also does, it offers additional opportunities. We've heard a lot about location flexibility and. We do see a lot of those teams that post projects that say, well, we don't care so much where you are located. In fact, our team has members from maybe 3-4 different countries or locations. We care more about the skills and the expertise that you bring that is so tremendously important for the work that we want to accomplish as a team. So I think it also does open up much more possibilities for cross-border working, but in a virtual setting. So again, I think one step towards also opening up more opportunities, many of which I think women can benefit a lot from. But I'd also like to say, I think there's also a lot of men who like the idea of being able to work on a project without necessarily having to relocate and change maybe countries even. I already spoke about the importance of having a diverse composition of teams and also providing an inclusive workplace environment. And here you see the 4 pillars on which this rests in our company. And I'd like to highlight actually our business resource groups in particular, because they play a key role and they are also key enablers and drivers of this in the company. And in particular, relevant for women is the GROW business resource group, who are advocating for the advancement of women. And on the next slide, I just want to highlight a few of the the things that we offer. And again, this is a non-exhaustive list. I think we've heard from our panelists already quite a few of those aspects. We collaborate quite a bit also with partners and the HBA Ambassador Program. So here we collaborate with the Healthcare Business Women's Association. This is a leadership development program for women. And I think it's been a huge success, talking to some of those amazing ladies who have participated. I think they feel this is a super good opportunity for them to develop. But I'd also like to highlight our Leadership Link program, where a lot of our male and female senior leaders offer their time for coaching. They offer their time for career discussions with our younger, more junior talents. But also they offer connections and the networking, because I think networking, being seen, being exposed, this is where I think we as senior leaders have an important role to play to help the more younger and up-and-coming talents in our organization benefit from our networks, just like we benefited from the networks of senior leaders when we were young or early in our careers. I think there's also a lot that we do around focused talent acquisition and development. And I think we've heard it from some of the panelists. Eliminating bias, I think, is super important. Bias is always going to be there, but how do you make sure you mitigate it as much as you can? So we do a lot of unconscious bias trainings, but also when you think of promotion decisions or decisions about filling positions, we look a lot at diverse candidate slates. I think this is a must. You cannot come up and say, I have a non-diverse slate. There's only this homogeneous group of talents that can possibly take up this role. But then I think it's also important to have really diverse interview panels. And we do rely a lot on interview panels and not just interviews by one or two individuals. And bringing those different perspectives together, I think, again, it helps eliminate bias. We heard a lot, and I'll be really brief because this has been touched on a lot about future of work. Of course, as a company, we do offer, I already mentioned with the talent marketplace, virtual cross-border assignments. We offer work flexibility. Of course, we do not have a return to office policy, by the way. Maybe we are one of the few exceptions. At least I was interested in, looking at your statistics. But we have very many and flexible work arrangements. And when the pandemic hit, we also very early on said, let's not try to come up with a global kind of arrangement, how to make it work, but let every country really decide what fits best for them. Now, I will say, if you move to an organization where a lot of the stuff really happens in those teams, I think finding the right balance between presence but also allowing flexibility of remote work arrangements, that is going to be the interesting piece. And this is, in all honesty, also where some of the teams still struggle a bit, because I think good teamwork also comes with intimacy, I'm tempted to say, and knowing each other well. And you can get to a certain level via a screen, but I heard some of the teams say, well, at least maybe at the beginning, because these are newly formed teams and they also change composition over time. At least we want to come together once every X weeks, months or so, in order to make sure we also engage not just on a formal, but also on an informal level. I already spoke about leadership, so maybe I can skip that. And with that, I want to make sure I leave enough time for, I'm sure, a lot of questions all of you have to either of the panelists. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Heike.